And welcome to another Mailbox, the first of 2019. And this week we've got a number of comments relating to what we think about the various systems in Battle for Azeroth, as well as our pros and cons in terms of whether Blizzard should communicate more with us. So, first thing we do, of course, is where's the mailbox? If you're new to this, we each week we plonk a mailbox down somewhere and you have to say where it is, which specific location it is in, and in which zone it is in. This one was correctly identified by disappointing a half dozen of people as the ruins of Artefact in Hillsbrad. So well done to those people. This week's should be easy. I hope it's easy. For some reason, the reason I chose this is not because I was thinking, right, let's do an easy one or let's do a difficult one. It was purely because last night I was just, again, thinking back to Vanilla WoW with the classic WoW stuff. And there was just a particular location where I had a lot of fun times. So I just plonked that one down. Be easy for a lot of you, I'm sure. So you just need to say specific location. This time the specific location isn't on a map, so a little bit of variation will be fine there. But you still need to say which zone it's in as well. So, excuse me, on to the actual comments this week. Now, it's a quick one, first of all, not wine related. Thank you very much. Yes, I am through the surgery now. I'm feeling a lot better. Still quite a long time before I will be fully recovered, but I'm getting there. Looking forward to going back to work tomorrow. But just in case anyone did want to follow it in more detail, I did just create, so I don't have to wash this channel with it, a specific channel just for updating and going through all the various aspects of my weight loss surgery, and that's called Dietetic Diaries. So you could go there if you wanted to see how things are going. Occasionally I might post the odd thing on Twitter and Facebook as well, but I haven't as yet. So into proper questions. So this is to do, there's a few questions on the video I did yesterday on AP, Artefact Power, and my changing view of what it's for. Now, I don't actually know what it's for at all now. So one person saying here, just this past week on Allcraft, Josh admitted that to reach their goal of AP 42, Method should be grinding islands 20 hours a day until the new raid drops. Because, of course, they haven't increased the artifact knowledge type thing for just yet. It will start up again at some point. Says this is only a problem that affects 75 people that play this game. People shouldn't take this game serious unless you are part of the Mythic World first race. That, I'm afraid to say, is absolute nonsense. You know, that I tell you what that's the equivalent of, just to show how ridiculous that statement is, is today is Sunday. Around in this country, in the UK, you've got people up and down the country playing in what's called Sunday League football. Football teams of amateurs, people who work during the week, but they like to play the game. They want to play it seriously, so they play in what's called Sunday League. And they'll be playing matches against other teams also in that league. All right? And they'll be taking it seriously. A long way off the skill and performance levels of the people right at the top of the game playing in things like the Champions League. The top professionals earning, millions of pounds a month. But you don't see anyone in the dressing rooms just before the match going, right, lads, we're not in the Champions League. There's no point in putting any effort in here. We might as well just go out, run around for a bit, and then go to the pub for a pie. No, they're taking the game seriously because they're playing that game and they're playing it competitively. And the same applies to raiding. It really doesn't matter what level you're competing at. You're competing. If you're just inside the top 100, you're competing and you want as much AP as possible, because it makes your character stronger. And everyone who's done any form of mythic raiding has experienced on not too infrequent a basis the 0% wipe. I remember in particular the worst one I experienced in Legion was Mistress Sassine, where we had a 0% wipe, and it was literally the amount of damage that needed to be done was one hit from anyone in the raid. One hit of my sword, one frostbolt, one whatever, one hit of a bog standard ability from anyone in that raid and she was dead. But we wiped just at that point. Now, if we had slightly better gear, that would have been a kill. And it's not like the next pull was the kill. It's not even like the next raid was the kill. It was another week before we had to wait for it. When you're really trying to progress as far as you can, you know, when you have those 0% wipes, it's not because you played really brilliantly necessarily. It's because things lined up for you. And when those things line up for you, which it often does for a first kill, you want to take advantage of it. And having everyone a bit higher on AP would do that and avoid those situations. So anyone at any level of competition, and it doesn't even have to be just inside the top 100, you could be just inside the top 1,000. If your attitude is to play competitively, to play seriously, then of course you're going to focus on AP, and in your guild you're going to say, well, that it matters, you need to be at a certain level or something like that, and preferably above it. And some players in that guild will go above that. It makes no difference where you'll end up fitting in the overall ladder. If you want to play competitively, that means you need to make sure your character is competitively geared. So it does matter. It matters for everyone for whom it matters. Next one. Also about AP. It says AP is basically the position of Blizzard trying to cater to two polar opposite player base. They basically admitted this for BfA, in that there's a group of people they want to have constant feel of improvement through an XP-like system. On the other hand, there's when I reach X, I am done. Essentially no AP or anything, just BIS gear. Basically, AP for this expansion is to basically have you go so far where it's important, but allow you to feel done. In effect, though, like other things when Blizzard and near enough anyone tried to do a happy medium, they find the medium is no one happy. Blizzard tried to cater to different and conflicting opinions, and it's blown up in their face past to expansion. The thing is, I don't even see it as catering to both. If they are trying to, and I've never heard them say they're trying to cater to both, I saw it, as I say, as catering to more casual players. Because more serious players don't need a bar to fill up before you get a thing, because you get things all the time. Gear is thrown at you these days, and has been for a few years. And you will get upgrades on a very regular basis. When I was Mythic raiding for some considerable number of years, it wasn't even just Legion, for some years, I was getting regular upgrades, proper upgrades. I don't just mean a new piece of gear. I mean actual upgrades that made my gear better. You don't have to wait very long. It's not like in vanilla where you could go for some time. You don't have to wait very long at all. So there is no need for that for serious players. So if that's genuinely what they think they're doing, then that's ridiculous. Artefact Power is only a downside for serious, particularly Mythic raiders. But I would argue also Mythic Plus Dungeoneers as well. I'm not going to speak about PvP players, don't know. It is only a downside. There are no pluses to it at all. But for casual players, I always imagined that because it gives you that visible level of progress, that because, yeah, you know, a very casual player may not get upgrades for several weeks, and then it's a bit like, you know, and they're the ones who will maybe go into LFR and feel themselves hard done by because a boss didn't drop the item they wanted. And they think, oh, I never get loot. When they're actually bedecked in perfectly good loot for LFR. They just don't have that one thing that's on this huge loot table anyway. So having the bar fill up for those, yeah, I thought, yeah, that's the thing. But just from my experience, what I was trying to explain is from a casual player point of view, although you can sort of see, yeah, I can see a bit of my bar. I know that I can work out how much work I have to put in to get that bar full. You know, so I can predict how long I need to spend to play to fill that bar. Sure. The problem is when I fill that bar, I don't actually get anything of any worth. You know, yes, it makes my character a little bit stronger. Great. But I'm already plenty strong enough to do the content I'm doing, which is not very much at the moment. I can't even find my social club to do the bloody Mythic Pluses at the moment. So don't need it. Don't need it. So the reward is not valuable to me. And, you know, and if anyone sees it as valuable to them, if they're a casual player in my sort of boots, then they're wrong, really. Next one, it says, I know Blizzard is a business and as such needs both sides, but from a gameplay standpoint, they need to look at one side or the other and say we're catering to Group X mostly, Group Y, we want you to stay, but we're not going to focus on you at all. No, they absolutely can't afford to do that, especially with losing so many. But also there's no need to do that. They just need to understand what different types of players want from the game. And what they fail to understand, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it and saying it, what they fail to understand is that casual players do not need power upgrades because for the content they're doing, they get that power very quickly and very easily. What casual players want is ways to customize their character. They want to feel their character growing in more cosmetic ways, and things like player housing and a proper transmog system without unnecessary chains in the way is what would do that. And they do not understand that. Even though they put some bits of content in the game along those lines, such as casual bits of content where you can get like a nice mount or pets or something like that. You know, there is stuff in there, but they just don't seem to understand that people go mad for it, and they should put more of that sort of stuff in and expand on that. And the serious players, again, some of them, okay, some are loot whores and are driven by the power upgrades, but what they're really driven by is the achievement. They just need the power upgrades to get to that level of achievement. But it's the achievement that matters to them. That's what they need to understand. They need to understand that it's totally different systems for each group, and it's not a difficult thing to do. They just make it harder than it is. Right, last little one on this one, I think. It says, AP worked in Legion because you could earn lots of it from everywhere and because it tied into an actually exciting artifact weapon. I disagree with that. The second one, okay, you can, yeah, the weapon I think is more engaging than the neck and the Azerite gear. But it says you could earn lots of it from everywhere. No, you couldn't. I think if you've got that perception, it's just that you could get it, you could get lots of it from the content you liked doing and now you can't. So I'm going to strongly suspect you enjoy your Mythic Plus dungeons. Because yes, in Legion you could get lots of AP from Mythic Plus dungeons. In BfA, not so much. But you couldn't get lots of it from everywhere. You couldn't get it from raiding. You got virtually none from raiding. It was quite pathetic the amount you got. Whereas, because raiding was what I wanted to do. And for my money, if you're going to collect this currency for playing the game, if the purpose of the currency was to keep us playing the game, so we stay subscribed, it should have been possible for you to get what you wanted from just raiding and not having to do loads of Mythic Plus dungeons. So no, I don't agree with that at all. All they've done in BfA is they've changed which content you can get lots of it from. So now you can't get lots of it from Mythic Plus dungeons. You can get lots of it from islands. So they haven't reduced the number of sources from which you can get the AP. They've just changed where the best sources of it are, the most efficient sources of it are. That's all. And they've changed it from what is a fun bit of content. But I always argue no content is fun if you're forced to do it more than you want to. Anything can become tiresome if you are made to do it more than you find fun. To islands, which, as some people have said, if you can do it with friends, if you do it with people it can be a great laugh. But if you can't, then it's pretty crap. It's really crap. And it says AP mainly from islands and tied into a neck no one cares about is just part of the endless BfA dumpster fire. Yeah, the fact that you're getting most of it from islands, and it's going onto a neck, and the neck, is more and more irrelevant. That's the problem I have with it. Actually, they're making the neck less. There's less emphasis on the neck than there should be, because that's the thing that's supposed to be the gift from Azeroth, and yet, yeah, it's not interested. So I would agree with that bit. On to the next one. It says, main reason I haven't picked up ESO is due to the reason you spoke of. I have so much time and money invested in WoW, I have a hard time coming off it. And this is, this has been a problem that people have pointed out since TBC. As soon as the game was a few years old, that was it. Because people spent so much time playing WoW. The idea that when another MMO comes out or just another game, and you think, but particularly an MMO, because with an MMO to really get into it, like with a normal game, just a single player game, you play the game, a few months later you can be done with it and having done everything with it. With an MMO, you're only just scratching the surface really after a few months, even if you play it quite a bit, because you have to get your character leveled up, and then there's a whole host of things you need to do with the game before you can even really properly experience the proper end game, if that's what you want to do. At the end of which you might decide it's not as good. And that's always the problem. And I think that's what's... Although I think if World of Warcraft came out now as it is, as a new game, I think it would do well. I think it would be all right. Obviously, it wouldn't do nearly as well because a lot of the people, the players that it still retains, are those ones, I think, who've invested so much time into it. And they know that they enjoy it. Obviously, the ones who don't play anymore. But they know they enjoy it. They might enjoy another game more. But they don't know that without putting the time in. And putting the time into that game means taking it away from something else, and that might mean this. And then you think to yourself, well, okay, I might then not like the new game. I've got to come back to this, and I've got to get myself back into it, and I've missed a load of stuff. So yeah, I think they retain, I don't know, I won't want to say how many, but I would say they retain a significant number of players because of that, because they're long-term players, and they don't want to risk, until WoW goes below their fun level, the level that it has to be at before they'll consider it worth doing. Until that happens, they won't really, a lot of people won't really risk putting that much time into another game. So yeah. Next one says, they really should have unlocked the 2 other allied races already. It would have given us something to play around with for this holiday content. Plus it would have gotten a bunch of people hyped to head into the new raid as a shiny new troll or Wicker Beast. I mean, you can certainly argue they should have brought it out by now. In fact, I would suggest that given that they'd announced like the Dark Iron Dwarfs and the Magar Orcs, and then the Zandalari Trolls and the Culturan Humans, and we've got access if we want it to the Dark Iron Dwarfs and the Magar Orcs, and not the other 2. I'd have definitely done it the other way around. I'd have brought out the Culturans and the Zandalari first. And I'd have always planned to do that. Nothing to do with people not really being too turned on with BfA. But bringing it out just before Christmas, it's not that there's anything specifically wrong with it, but it doesn't necessarily help the situation because people just don't play as much over Christmas, regardless. You know, some people by choice, some people not by choice. There's a lot, not everyone is as sad as maybe you, but certainly me, and going to be on their own and all the rest of it and playing games potentially. Although I haven't played as much as I thought I would this Christmas because it has been sitting down for long periods of time, especially up against this desk, has not been that comfortable for most of Christmas. It's all right now. But yeah, for a lot of people, whether it's forced joviality or otherwise, they're going to be away from the computer a lot, visiting people, having people visit them, reintegrating with family, all the rest of it. So, no, bringing anything out just before Christmas is worthless. I mean, they did that with Trial of Valor a couple of years ago. Pointless, utterly pointless. So, no. But I do think they should have already brought it out. And I think they should have kept the Dark Iron Dwarfs and the Magar Orcs for a slower part. Because, again, it's like I keep saying, with an expansion, you need to lead with some really great stuff. Yes, you build on it and you bring out other stuff throughout the expansion. But you need to start with a bang. And Warfronts and Islands are not a bang. You know, regardless of whether or not systems work to people's satisfaction or not, the actual content itself is not interesting enough to carry the hype of a new expansion. I'm not saying the new allied races would have done, but they would have. I think both of those things would have, those allied races would have been considered more exciting than Warfronts or Islands to people. You know, of course, not everyone will want to roll one, but those who do. And as you say, if we'd have had them already, we could have had them ready for the new raid. Or say we, people who are going to be doing the new raid, could have had them ready for the new raid. Absolutely. Yes. But there you go. But no, for Christmas itself, although some people will use the opportunity to level them up if they want to level them from scratch, as opposed to just race change, then yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, there's so many people just don't play the game over Christmas, and they know that. Design direction, I've titled this one, what have I called it? It says, unfortunately, they've sort of answered the design directions of a lot of things I care about. GCD changes are staying for offensive buffs, forced personal loot staying, and Titan Forges staying. They're wasting a lot of development time revamping initial BfA systems just to get them back to neutral. Islands revamped in 8.1. Still spending a lot of time art assets on new Warfronts. Revamping the entire Azeroth system in 8.2. And at least looks like they have someone new on class design, which is sorely needed. But I think with all this happening, we'll have far less content in the end than Legion did. I agree, 8.2 is how things should have started. Unfortunately, it has to come 7 or 8 months in, and thus the seeming exodus from the game of a lot of folks. I mean, what I would say on that is, in terms of the things that are sort of, you say, are definitely staying, there's no such thing as definitely staying. Even when you look at, if you think about the major systems that have come into expansions throughout WoW's history, very few of them stand the test of time. I mean, very few of them. So, I mean, probably the only one that's really stood the test of time is flying, and Blizzard didn't even want that to stand the test of time. Systems come and go all the time. Yes, at the moment they are absolutely keen on the Forced Personal Loot and the Titan Forge, and GCD on offensive buffs. Yes. That being said, it doesn't mean to say that in the next expansion they won't change their mind, or as senior developers come and go. You got to remember that although they keep talking about team and team decisions, that's not the same thing as unanimous views. They're certainly not unanimous. There will be developers that are against all of the things you've just mentioned there. It's just that the balance of influence, not necessarily a strict democratic process, but the balance of influence was in favour of having them. As senior developers come and go, that balance can change, and has done in the past and will do again in the future. So it can be a combination of two things. It can be over time, if something doesn't look like it's working, or it just seems to be desperately unpopular, then they can change their mind. Or secondly, it could be that people who were always of that view come into positions of influence and therefore nudge it along as well. Something like the war fronts they are committed to. It's a bit like garrisons in WoD. They weren't very popular, but they were sort of committed to the process, so they had to keep going with it. They tweaked things a little bit. Obviously, the shipyard that we got at the end of WoD would not have been exactly as it was were it not for the criticisms of the garrisons thing. They sort of learnt a few things there, but they were still committed to the overall thing because it's part of the expansion plan. In terms of your fear that we might have far less content than in Legion, I think that's probably right, but I also strongly suspect they didn't even plan to do as much, because like I keep saying, Legion had more development time and developers working on it than any other expansion before or since, just because of the unique way that was planned, because they tried to move to a situation where they'd do 2 expansions in parallel and then moved away from that because it was a stupid idea. But what it meant was that Legion was the beneficiary of way more resources than was intended. They're not going to ever allow that. And in fact, there have been reliable leaks. Leaks are always leaks and they're never going to be confirmed, but I'll say reliable, that World of Warcraft has been told that it has to cut costs. So there is 0 chance that you're going to get as much content in BfA as you would have done in Legion, even if they weren't having to spend development time on fixing up systems that they seem to think were going to go perfectly well to begin with, and that haven't. But you are quite right, spending development time, I've said this, spending development time on development that you didn't plan for is obviously going to take it away from development that you did plan for, because you can't increase the hours in the day or magic up some new developers, especially when costs are being cut, not increased. So, it'll be what it is. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a bad year for World of Warcraft. We still may enjoy what they've got planned for us. I am looking forward to 8.2. I don't see anything in 8.1 personally that's to get excited about. 8.2, yes, storyline if nothing else, but we'll just have to see how it goes. But yeah, I don't think there's any such thing as a feature that is here to stay. In terms of level scaling, it says level scaling finally killed the game for me. When every combat feels mostly the same, every place feels mostly the same, and your character's perceived power level varies so little, the game's core treadmill just feels that much worse. Tangentially, if a questline story is so weak that players abandon it because leveling isn't efficient anymore, I'd say that's a problem with the design focus on getting to a higher level and a weakness of the writing, not something that can be addressed by auto-scaling enemies. The thing is, though, although I can quite see people who don't have experience of other MMOs that have scaling in can see scaling as being the problem, because yes, as you level up, in fact, you say that it all feels the same. I'd go further and say you feel weaker. And people have made the point you do feel weaker, especially when you're leveling BfA. It is absolutely the worst experience leveling in BfA from a scaling point of view, because not only have you got the same problem we've all, you would have had in Legion with it, in that your super duper gear from the previous expansion is staying the same, which means in terms of percentage crits, haste, all that sort of stuff, it's getting weaker. But the mobs are getting stronger. So you are actually taking longer on to kill mobs. You have that point in BfA where you have to abandon your legendaries as well. That is a huge kick in the nuts. So you feel way weaker for the last few levels. And that is why when I was leveling in BfA, obviously I had the experience to be able to do this, having played the alpha and beta, I decided to do the toughest zone first, where I thought I'd have to deal with the most mobs, where you've got the highest density of mobs for the quests I was going to be doing. Do the worst zone first and work your way up to the easiest zone last when you're going to be weakest. So yeah, I would go further. But the problem is it's not a consequence of scaling, because there are other games I've played, MMOs, where scaling exists, and I do not feel weaker as I go up in levels. I still feel stronger. And that's because all Blizzard did with World of Warcraft is they just put the scaling in, and they didn't create... Again, it's what they do now. It's what they've been doing for the past few years, and it really frustrates me. They put in a thing, but they don't consider it holistically. They don't consider the overall package. They just put in a thing, and it doesn't work with the rest of the system. What they need to do, instead of tinkering with the engine, is take the engine out and put a new bloody engine. I don't mean a games engine. I'm just talking metaphorically here. You need to think about the consequences of it and do fuller redesigns of it all, even if it means we have to take longer. And it's possible that they are doing that. They have talked about a major revamp, not so much on the horizon. They said it's a long-term project for the leveling experience, and that obviously, well, you would hope would take account of that. But yeah, that's the issue. If you play games like ESO, Star Wars: The Old Republic, as you level up, you don't feel weaker. It's scaled. And in ESO, it's properly scaled as well. You go wherever you bloody well like. It's scaled. But you do not, well, if you can get whenever you want, you do not feel weaker as you level up at all. Stronger. Because the whole system was designed with scaling in mind. Star Wars: The Republic, it wasn't. Scaling came in later, but it's still the nature of the leveling means that you still get stronger. So on to communication then. Last real topics. It says, so this was part of a conversation, of course, where they were trying to explain that it's a good thing that their developers are not allowed to talk to the public because things could go wrong. So a response here was, but the risk that they say too much is really big, and WoW fans take everything written in blue as a promise, so Blizzard employees are simply not allowed to communicate. That's not true, okay? The risk of them saying too much is zero. The thing I try and make is, there are industry, like lots of people. I work for a company where I speak to members of the public and to customers. I've got students, they're my customers, and I talk to parents and stuff like that. And yes, sometimes there are things I'm not supposed to say. It's not difficult for me to not say them because I know what those things are. And we don't even have to talk about other industries as well. This industry, there are games companies that do regular, and by regular I mean properly regular, live streams where you've got developers and people just talking, and I mean properly live, where they read questions in the chat and respond to it. It's all fine. No one's dropped a clanger. It's fine. Because do you know what? Games developers are actually fairly intelligent people. They can be trusted. They know what they're supposed to keep under wraps for now because it's not been fully developed. They know what, exciting new information they're allowed to release because their bosses have said so. And beyond that, they know what the parameters... Blurry, I hate going blurry. They know what parameters there are for what they can talk about, and they can talk totally relaxed. They don't have to think about what they say. The risk that they say too much, it's not just that it's low, it is that it is zero. Absolutely zero. And also this thing about WoW fans taking everything written in blue as a promise is also untrue. Blizzard said that. That's something Blizzard said when they did promise certain things for Warlords of Draenor and didn't deliver. And they said, no, we never promised them at all. Even though people have recordings of it, it's not true. If they were to write blue posts, instead of saying this is coming up and that's coming up, because when they say that, that is a promise. But if they said something like, right, we're working on this, we've got some ideas, we're sort of thinking, this, maybe this, there's some pros and cons. What do you guys think? That's fine. No one takes that as a promise because you know what? As well as developers being intelligent, most people who play MMOs, all right, much greater range of intelligence, but they're not generally stupid. So they understand, you know, if Blizzard make it clear, these are ideas we're thinking about, but there's various pros and cons, but we'd like your input on it. What do you think of these things? Then everyone understands that it's just a process of communication, which would be really effective. And at the end of it, it might be that they don't put any of them into practice, even though you might really like them to. As long as the communication is there, then it's fine. So WoW fans do not take things written in blue as a promise. That's just what Blizzard said when they did promise something and didn't deliver. It's true that Blizzard employees are not allowed to communicate, but it's got nothing to do with it being a sensible decision. It's not. Other games companies can do it, and if they themselves used to be able to do it without mishap, then there is no issue with it at all. I'm not sure about what you're trying to say here. So I understand the reasons, but I understand Blizzard as well. They tried it with Ghostcrawl and it was a lie. It happened again and again and again. Just because you've got people who are bad at communicating with the public doesn't mean to say communication with the public is a bad idea. You just got people who are not very good at it doing it, right? Don't get the people who are bad at doing it. This is one person, a lead designer, who knows exactly how to communicate and work not really well. No, he doesn't. Ghostcrawler was not someone. He was someone who was comfortable communicating. That's not the same as being good at communicating. He actually wasn't. He very frequently said things that were ill thought out. You know, he was actually a bad communicator. He was just someone who wasn't afraid of communicating. It's not the same thing, you know. It says, of course, they should communicate. And also, it wasn't actually that much of a disaster anyway during Ghostcrawler's time. There were times when it went badly because he said something stupid, you know. But by and large, people didn't complain about communication with Blizzard at the time. Says, of course, they should communicate more and better. Of course, they must work on their internal processes. But knowing the WoW forums for 14 years, you don't think direct communication would be a good idea? It would be a good idea. It's a good idea. You can see it in other... If you can have games companies, you've companies in the same industry that do it and do it bloody well, there is no reason why these guys can't do it. None at all. I mean, they are sort of trying... It's like... The way I would describe it is they're trying to be seen to communicate better, but they're not actually trying to communicate better. I mean, there is another little thing which we're not supposed to talk about, but... the Monk forums, the Discord, that is, the official Monk Discord, let slip Blizzard's latest idea for communicating. But it's a really, you know, silly, it's an attempt at looking like they want to communicate. I won't go into any detail because I'm not supposed to say anything, but bloody hell. You know, it's so easy. Do what other games companies do. Do a weekly thing, get someone on talking about it, nice and free, read the comments, answer the questions, job done. Easy. Other people do it. If anyone with exactly the same situation as you can do something, then you can do it. Just needs a bit of effort. And then finally on to the last point, it says Blizzard needs to hire me as a consultant to teach them how to talk to their customers. No, they don't. They probably do need to hire a consultant, not me. I mean, I can only see fairly obvious things. I mean, that's the problem, but they're so bad at it that I can see things. It's a bit like, not for the first time this week, I'm going to have to use a Kitchen Nightmares analogy. It's a bit like, you know, if I were to go in like in a Kitchen Nightmares just to take the place of Gordon Ramsay one week or something, I don't even know if they still do it anymore. But if I did, like, you know, if I go in and the decor's a load of shit, I could say that because that's obvious. If I go in and the food tastes like shit, I could say that as well because that's obvious. If I go into the kitchen, you know, and I go into the walk-in fridge and there's slime coming off the walls and there's rotting food everywhere and there's raw meat mixed with cooked meat, I could see that as a problem because all of those things are supposed to be so obvious that it shouldn't be possible for a professional to get it wrong, right? But there are also things that I wouldn't see because I'm not a professional restaurateur. And just like in here, I'm not a professional PR expert. So there'll also be things that they could do to improve it all that I wouldn't think of. So they probably should get someone in to consult with them. You know, preferably someone who's an expert in that field. Or just talk to designers in other companies and about their worries and how they do it if it's not bleeding obvious. But, you know, they probably ought to do something. But yeah, I mean, just because I can point out some obvious things, don't mean to say I'd be the right person to do it. But anyway, there we go. That is this week's mailbox. There'll be another one, of course, next week. So keep the comments coming. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe and share for further content. Until next time, I'll see you later.